1977, George Lucas formed a legacy.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force.
Inspired by mythology, his saga has become a passion for many.
Feel the Force around you.
His legend has become our story.
It's true. All right.
One of resistance,
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
rebellion,
Rebellion is built on hope.
and redemption.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
This is Star Wars Reactions.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Well, hello and welcome everybody to Star Wars Reactions. We are so thankful you are joining us this week. Whew, man, we got a lot to talk about, folks. Yeah. It's going to be a goodie. My name is Aaron Harris, and joining me is the man, the myth, the legend, the David Motters. David, brother, what's up?
Oh man, this season finale, apparently not series finale per what it says on Disney Plus. I hope that is true, and ready to react. Had a great time recording with you, covering episode 7, and I have, just as much to talk about in this episode as well, and hopefully people will enjoy it. So ready to react and ready to, finish up Acolyte season 1.
There we go. That is exactly what we're going to do, is talk about the season finale, episode 8 of The Acolyte, which ironically was entitled The Acolyte. Oh, that's a dad joke, and I didn't even know it. But fabulous episode. Let's jump right into this, because I don't want to waste any time at all here, because we got so much to break out and talk about, and we could probably go 2 hours and still not cover everything that was in this episode. But we don't want to do that to y'all, so we're going to hit on the highlights and just have a great discussion. Now, of course, this episode was released on the 16th of July, 2024, directed by Hanel Culpepper, written by Jason Micallef. Of course, the synopsis straight from the annals of StarWars.com is: as all paths converge on Bryndock, Master Saul and May return to where it all began for a final confrontation with the Stranger and Osha inside the twins' former home. Meanwhile, Master Vernestra Rwoh gathers Jedi Knights, seeking a resolution to their investigation into May's crime spree, but arrives on Bryndock too late. In the burned-out remains of the Witch's Fortress, the sisters reunite in their childhood bedchamber to confront their past pain and come to terms with the fire and everything that was consumed by it. Master Saul decisively bests the Stranger in a ferocious duel. However, given the chance to execute Saul with his own weapon, May tosses the lightsaber away, and the assassin no longer hungers for revenge. What she wants is justice, and Saul to admit what he did to the High Council. But even as Saul regrettably admits killing their mother before Osha's shocked eyes, the Jedi is adamant that he did the right thing to protect the twins. His confession pushes the twins to the brink, leaving the Stranger what he craves: an acolyte.
Dun, dun, dun.
Whew. Okay, initial reactions, David. Let's kick this off, my friend. You go first.
Okay. All right. First and foremost, this episode continues to provide more material for really to continue my discussion from our last episode, our last podcast episode, where we covered episode 7, Choice. And we talked on the topics of good and evil, right and wrong, lies, ultimate truth, and relativism. It was so fun to record that with you. So fun to talk about those issues. I really enjoy them, and I really would love for more people to talk about them and discuss them. And so this episode continues it all the way through. And, we'll hit that in our talking points with some of the decisions that Vernestra makes. The interactions between Soul and, like we said, Osha and May and the stranger there as they're on Brendock, and what Osha ends up doing to Soul. And I'll tell you, there's again so much deeper, rich areas to cover, and I'll do that a little bit later here, especially for our good friend in Wales, Daz Davies. He was wanting me to cover the psychology behind Qimir, and I'll hit up on that in one of our talking points. So really cool stuff to cover. It was interesting to see Yoda, in this episode as well. Does he get pulled in? Does he get lied to by Vernestra? I don't know. But that is fascinating. And again, to tie into what I'm going to cover regarding Qimir, it's interesting that we see that Vernestra sees Qimir as evil. That's part of her conversation at the end of the episode. But she doesn't seem to be thinking about the Sith. And I just feel like, that's huge, because it allows the Sith, to remain hidden and consistent with, everything we've seen in canon so far. So, really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a really nice capper to the season. And like I said, I have so much more to discuss. You said it well, buddy. We could easily go past 2 hours and not cover everything in this episode. But how about, what are your initial reactions?
Well, my initial reactions are very simple. Holy freaking free holies, dude. I mean, wow, what an ending. If you listen to the last episode, I did not watch this episode till late Wednesday night, which was after we recorded episode 184, where we talked about choice, because I didn't want to have this episode affecting how I thought about that episode. And I am so glad I did. And I'm even happier that I managed to stay pretty much spoiler free for the episode, because, dude, what a rush. I mean, geez. I will go ahead and throw out there again, because I've said it in the past with these episodes. The predictability of the writing kicked in again. I was able to call several key factors earlier in the season, and it came to fruition here. And despite all that, though, this was a fantastically executed episode. Perfection on the musical score. Cinematography was incredible. And the chef kiss of it all was that fight between Qimir and Saul. Oh my gosh, so beautifully shot and so beautifully choreographed. Of course, the reveals that came in, and it was just absolutely incredible seeing how it goes, and of course, priceless the ending was. It was finale excellent. It is. Excellent finale. Absolutely. I honestly loved it. And there's no doubt in my mind that we will get a season 2. We have to at this point. The story is not done. It's not over, and it ended perfectly. And we have to get a season 2. I am positive we will be getting this. So it's just a matter of waiting for the announcement.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. So, man, okay, let's jump into these talking points, because we highlighted a few things we did want to jump into and talk about here, because this is just such an intense and exciting episode. Let's talk about man. man, I don't even know where to begin. Okay, let's go to the beginning of the episode. We have everything. We have Osha in the helmet, literally right where the last episode left off, or the not last episode, episode 6, right where episode 6 left off, with her in that helmet, isolated, just her and the Force. And Qimir walks in with her in the beginning of this episode. She's wearing that, and of course we see her start to convulse and almost freak out a little bit in the helmet. And Qimir goes to help it, and all of a sudden he's like frozen in the Force trying to get to her. And then we see almost that possession that we see at the beginning of episode, or at the beginning of the series, when Mother Anastasia took over Torben. His eyes turned black, and and of course, if you notice too, the lighting and the changes as well. It goes from the cave, the yellow, lightish cave colors, to that dark blue lighting, almost like it did with Torben. They went from the crowd setting to the Force setting, and I thought that was just absolutely amazing. So then it's just a matter of, who did that? Was that Osha? I mean,
I don't know. That's one of the questions I ask. We see his eyes go oil black.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, wait a minute, is it the Sith Lord apparently that we see, in the cave there? Was it Mother Anastasia? I'm like, is she still alive? She died. Is it Coral? Is it like you mentioned, is it Osha doing that and his eyes going oil black? That's not clear to me. What's your take?
Oh man, I don't even know what to think about at that point. I honestly, I'm more leaning to the fact that I think it was Osha, because being isolated in that helmet, it's just her one-on-one with the Force. And of course, because of even though it's Osha and she does want to be she had wanted to be a Jedi. I mean, she was that's not really the right word to use. I want to say she was forged, but she really wasn't forged. She was created in the Virgins through the dark side. So it's got to be prevalent in there. Yeah. So by isolating herself from the outside world and just having that helmet on, I think the dark side really took over. And that power that she had, that she got from her mom, just started exuding out of her at that point. So I honestly think it was probably Osha. And I think this is what starts her on that dark side journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Which we see at the end of this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do. Yeah. Now, of course, they end up leaving that planet, which is still classified as the unknown planet, and head off to Brendok, where they know Osha, or where they know where May and Saul are. And as they're flying away, we get a peek of somebody.
Oh yeah.
And this person peeking around the corner, watching them leave, looks a lot like a certain master of the dark side.
Yeah.
a certain Mun.
Yeah.
Who was obsessed with living forever. And ended up biting the bullet because of his apprentice. If you don't catch my drift, I'm pretty sure that was Darth Plagueis.
Well, and Aaron and I were talking about this before we recorded. I was looking back at the cover, the original cover of the book, and you see Darth Sidious, Palpatine, kneeling down, and Darth Plagueis looking down over him, and you see his face. And then I was just on Audible earlier today looking at the cover that they did for the Essential Legends collection. Mm-hmm. Has, Darth Plagueis behind Palpatine sitting on a chair. And I'm like, both of those images look like this character. And I think it is. I think pretty much everyone's in agreement that's Darth Plagueis.
Yes. The and I know we've talked about this a lot off the air, because it's speculative and stuff. We try not to speculate on the show, but I mean, when you look at the history of Darth Plagueis, even going into the legends or the expanded universe or however you want to call it, the timeline fits for where we are. He would be alive at this time. He would be empowered. He would be a Sith. So the timeline fits for this to be Darth Plagueis. So, well, we don't know. We nothing confirmed, but
right.
That's what it looks like.
Well, then it also makes sense for the title of the episode, the title of the series, because then these are the questions we had in earlier episodes, particularly when the stranger appeared. Is the stranger the Sith Lord? Is that Plagueis? Is that Darth Tenebrous? We were asking these questions, and or is he a Sith apprentice? And so it would make the most sense. Darth Plagueis, the stranger Qimir, is the Sith, right? Sith Lord. He's the Sith apprentice Qimir, and then here's Osha as the Acolyte, just like Darth Sidious Palpatine, Count Dooku, the Sith apprentice, Ventress, the Acolyte.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that really feels like that's been revealed and cleared up. I think that's what it is. Like you said, there's nothing confirmed even at the Star Wars episode guide, StarWars.com episode guide for this. It doesn't say who it is, but I'm going with Darth Plagueis.
Yeah, that's I would say that's the safe bet.
Yeah,
that's definitely the safe bet. So of course, moving on, of course, we end up on Brendok, and this is where the story comes to fruition, and we have this Qimir and Osha show up, and Saul and May are already there, and eventually Vernestra and a slew of Jedi, which is she actually brought more than she actually brought the right amount this time, to Brendok, and we see that yeah, there's so much that happens in here on Brendok. So let's start with the main action, which of course is the lightsaber duel between Sol and Qimir. Probably one of the best choreographed fights I've seen in a long time when it comes to a lightsaber duel. What do you think?
Oh, loved it. Two things I really liked was, and you probably noticed this, brother, is at one point Qimir, the stranger, puts one of his lightsaber blades, right? He's got the two, he's separated them, I believe, right? And he's trying to pull Sol's lightsaber blade towards his own head to short it out with the cortosis.
Yep.
That was cool. And of course, most of the time you want to have a striking blow, but in this case, it would not help Sol. So I thought that was really cool. And then the other shot that I really liked, and I just thought about it as you were describing it, this is where Sol and Qimir are up above, kind of where the witches shot arrows down at Torben and that structure. And they're doing their lightsabers, boom, 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 battling around. And it really struck me. It reminded me of Revenge of the Sith, where Obi-Wan and Anakin are battling on Mustafar in that hallway, and their lightsabers are hitting both sides of the walls and cutting. Yes. And it really gave me those flashbacks, which I think was really cool. I'm just mentioning two parts of the fight. I've been watching some of the videos on Manny Jacinto's training for this, and between the one and night, right? There's day, then night. Night, he just cleans house with Jedi. This one-on-one battle, and the real focus on these two is really cool, because that's kind of historically, Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in Episode 4, and Luke and Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back, and then of course again in Return of the Jedi, and just seeing these big battles. This was just excellent, man. Just really cool lightsaber action. I loved it. How about you?
Man, I loved the action, and about the two scenes you mentioned. One, when he's pulling the saber toward the cortosis with his own lightsaber.
Right.
Absolutely genius, personally, because it's definitely not a tactic you would expect when you're fighting somebody. Oh, let me pull the saber toward my head. But when he does it, I don't know if you notice, Saul is almost a little taken back by it. He has to reverse his strategy at that point, because he's trying to force it in, and now he's trying to pull it back.
Right. Saul's trying to pull it back.
it just a complete reverse strategy, and it almost confused Saul for a second, and he actually played it off very well. Lee Jung-jae, actually, his facial expressions were perfect in that scene, because it was a close-up. You got those expressions just right, and he really took the task at that point. Then, of course, back up on the bridge where you were talking about, where they were just going down, fighting and hitting both sides, and you could see it coming through the wall and everything. But what I liked the most was the end of that, when they go off the bridge back to the main level, and they just kind of float through the air.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was just beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't, there's just something about that one move where they both come out of the bridge and they're flying, kind of just gliding to the ground. There's just something beautiful about that. I don't know what it is, but there's just something so beautiful in that moment, in that scene, that I just absolutely adored.
No, it's just Manny Jacinto, and I don't know how much Lee Jung-jae did, and I don't know if Manny Jacinto had, again, stunt double come in for him periodically, but I think Manny Jacinto tried to do as much as he possibly could, and just kudos to them for what they pulled off.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, the lightsaber duel progresses into, while that's going on, we have Osha and May meeting up for the first time in the room where Osha was trapped in when they were kids, when May set the fire.
Right.
And of course, they have a discussion, and May's telling her, like, no, he's been lying to you, and it's not true, and he's been blaming me. And Osha's defending Saul. He's like, he never blamed you.
Yeah.
He never blamed you for what happened. And next thing you know, they start fighting, and their moves were this was just a hand-to-hand combat situation there. And their moves were just, oh my gosh. The fighting in this final episode was just so beautifully choreographed. It's so smooth and so quick and so fulfilling.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's kind of, again, the duality again that Leslie Headland talks about, the duality between, inside of Saul, inside of Qimir, the duality of the twins, and then the duality of these two different scenes, and then how they come together, kind of in that main courtyard area.
Oh yeah, definitely. And of course, when everybody converges on the courtyard, that's when we have May confronting Saul about what happened, and she gets him to, of course, confess that he killed the mother. Yeah. He killed Mother Anastasia. And of course, she gets him to confess that because Osha is standing behind him and he doesn't know. Then, of course, Osha is devastated at this point, and she's like, tell me, that's not true. That can't be true. And Saul turns around and he just begins to justify what he's like, I did it for you. I did it to protect you. And I love how he said his biggest regret was not being able to save both kids.
Right.
and that's when he reveals to him. Of course, he revealed to May in front of Qimir. So, like I said, I just really couldn't tell if this was news to Qimir that they weren't twins. They were one individual split by the Force. And so it was really a unique situation because you don't know who knows what at that point, or what's news for who. Did you think this was news for Qimir?
I do. And in fact, this was a question I had for you. Here's where I'm channeling my inner Rebel base card podcast format, where they ask a series of questions. A question that I have for you was, why is Sol revealing this kind of information in front of Qimir? Now, it might be the case he's doing it just because of, look, everything's hit the fan. He's battled Qimir. Here he's in front of May and Osha, and he's just like, look, I'm just going to say it. Because several times during that scene, you see Qimir back there just thinking. And when he talks about emergence and the power that's revolving around this and creating life, you know that Qimir goes back and talks to Darth Plagueis about this. Mm-hmm. You know, and so I was really struggling. I'm like, oh my gosh, so why? No, not in front of Qimir, you know, and yes, maybe in front of May and Osha, and they can always go back and tell Qimir, but at least not in front of him. That's what I thought. I could just see the whole thing playing out, and then of course, as he's saying this, Aaron, mm-hmm. to the twins. And he's listening in, Qimir. All I can visualize in my mind is Revenge of the Sith and Palpatine looking to Anakin in the Opera House on Coruscant saying, have you ever heard about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? You know, he believed he could, you know, create life, you know, and I'm like, right here in this conversation, right? It's
yep.
right. It's right here. And I was like, oh, Sol, you've already done so much damage. Now of course, he's not thinking about Sith either, right? Mm-hmm. He's really not. I don't even know, like in the previous episode of episode 5, Night, says, what are you? You know, he's not even mentioning Sith or talking about a red lightsaber. So maybe, I don't know, maybe he's just not thinking clearly. He's so stressed, battling for his life, but he's talking about stuff that ends up not helping 100 years from now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's one of these things where he's trying to, and I don't think he's just telling everything to save his tail. I think he's literally, like he says, he's trying to do what's best for May and Osha. And I think to the very end, he is trying to do what's best for them. I think Saul is one of those people who are, what's the word? He's trying to, he ends up doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. Yeah. And he's in turmoil dealing with that ever since, because it's definitely an issue, and it ends up backfiring. It catches up to him. It backfires on him, because look at what happens. Osha loses it and kills him.
I know. And I think that goes to what you said a few minutes ago about her having that helmet on. Mm-hmm. You said that it kind of starting that path, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it complete, and by her letting go, and she didn't just kill him, she force choked him to death. I mean, she
really really personal.
Pulled a page out of Vader's handbook and just force choked him to death.
Yeah.
And it is and it's an intense moment to watching this happen. And I think what blew me away while it's happening, Saul looks at her and goes, "It's okay."
What did you think about that? What do you think? More importantly than what I think,
to me, that whole thing mirrors the death of Han Solo. When Kylo's like, "I know what I got to do, but I don't have the strength to do it," and he's like, "We'll do it together." And honestly, it's one of those things where he was there for her, and I think he was at the realization at that moment, this is the path that she has to follow, and there's nothing he's going to be able to do to stop her from following this path, and he needs to pay for his crime anyway. So it's okay.
Yeah.
He's and I think and that happened, and I immediately saw Han and Kylo on that bridge, and then that lightsaber lighting up and going straight through him, and then him falling to his death. I mean, it was, to me, it was very definitely different circumstances, but the mood and the thought behind everything, to me, lined up the same.
Yeah, that's a good point. And almost like to become Sith or to go that way, you have to kill somebody, right? Or this belief that you have to, Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, in the journey that Osha's on, it was brought to fruition by May. What was May's final task? To kill a Jedi without a weapon.
Right.
May and Osha are the same person. Osha just killed somebody. So they killed somebody without a weapon.
They did.
And their journey is complete.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like Vader trying to bring Luke over to the dark side. Holy cow, man. Oh,
absolutely insane. Insane what's going on here. I've got to say, it is so deep. The storytelling in this is even though there's a lot of predictability, there's a lot of deep storytelling in this. So, all right, well, we still got a lot to talk about, and let's go ahead and take our first break. We'll be right back, and we're going to keep talking about the Acolyte. Welcome back, everybody. Aaron and David here. We're talking about the 8th and final episode of this season of The Acolyte, entitled The Acolyte. A little redundant, but it works. So before the break, we were talking about the journey of May and Osha to what happened up until this point, and their journey coming to culminate with the death of Saul.
Right.
And of course, at this point, the Jedi arrive on the planet Brendok, and they all disembark from their ship. And as Vernestra Rwoh exits the ship, she stops, closes her eyes, raises her hand, and all of a sudden, with shock and surprise, goes, "You're alive." At which point, Qimir pretty much jumps out of his socks, throws his helmet on, and disappears.
Right.
So, and of course, we find out later that she says this is a pupil of mine before he turned evil, when she's talking to May at the end. So I was right. I called it.
You did.
Qimir, it was a Padawan Padawan of, or they didn't use say Padawan, but a pupil. So we would assume a Padawan of Vernestra. So those scars on his back are probably from her whip saber.
Yeah, and here's stuff you can cover in season 2, like flashbacks. How did that happen? Was it Vernestra doing that to him? Was it him grabbing her light whip from her and trying to kill her, and it comes back and hits his back? I mean, again, here's all our points of view. But you did call it. You called it, and particularly, they showed that scar and they showed the light whip in the same episode. So, credit to you. I remember when you told me that before we started recording that night. I'm like, of course, Aaron's right. It's true, and you nailed it, buddy.
So yeah, so that was fun to nail that one. But then, of course, this causes all the Jedi to rush to the compound. Of course, Qimir is disappeared and is hiding, and of course, Osha and May team up and make their escape, following pretty much the escape route that May took as a child. So we get to see how she survived the fall and where she went when she was done. And of course, they go back to their yellow weeping willow tree, and have a discussion there. And of course, the Jedi come into the compound. They find Saul. She has everybody spread out, search the compound, set up a perimeter, and it leaves her alone with the body of Saul. And Vernestra walks over and kneels down, and she's like, "I'm sorry, my friend." And when that happened, I'm like, why is she sorry? Why is she apologizing at this point? I mean, she's sorry that he's dead. Okay, yeah, but that's kind of weird to be like, mourning somebody and telling them you're sorry. And then, of course, when she throws him under the bus, to, of course, the investigative council and to May and everything at the end, she basically just spins this tale about how everything that happened was caused by Saul and his deception, and he was not a good guy, and he tried to do the right thing and did the wrong thing, and it was just a whole mess. He was a bad seed in the order, and that he was dead. And I saw that, and it just drove me nuts. And honestly, it took me honestly to a quote from the Dark Knight. He's not the hero we deserve, but he was the hero we needed, nothing less than a knight. And he is being that right now to save the order in the eyes of the Republic.
Yeah. Well, as you were describing this, I was thinking about, again, our coverage of episode 7, Choice. And like you were saying, when she leans over and touches his cheek, she's making a choice right there. She's making the decision that I'm going to try to keep this under wraps, preserve the view of the Jedi and the Republic, in the view of the Republic and the Senate. And that's a massive choice. Now, this is very different than the Vernestra you and I have been reading about in the Marvel comics and books. She's, pretty heroic, and this is quite a character change. I'm looking at Star Wars: The High Republic. This is issue 9, by Kevin Scott, and I think there's gonna be 10 of this before they stop and start some other stuff. But on the cover, it says a century before the Acolyte. So I was going to mention that. So they've got that kind of branding on the comics, but Vernestra is not like this. This is a big change. Well,
again, this brings up a point of debate at this point, because you said you're right. It's not the type of actions we've seen her take in the books or in the comics, but is it any less heroic?
Oh, what she's doing?
What she's doing to save the order.
Yeah. Whew. Well, well, it's again, it's getting into kind of what we talked about at the end of the last episode when Indara makes a choice
Mm-hmm.
to, counter Soul's choice. I'm going to throw myself in front of the council. I'm going to tell them what happened. Let's just get this wound cleared out. And I do feel like it's continuing the problem. It's the wound continues to fester. Instead of saying, hey, Saul wasn't responsible for this, but there's, my former pupil is running around and I didn't know this. Now, again, she walks in to talk to Yoda and I don't know what she's going to say. Is it going to be about the pupil? Is she going to tell him the truth that, Saul didn't do all that? There was a horrible mistake on Brendock 16 years ago. Saul was there. He wasn't the only participant, etc. I don't know. But,
Yeah.
It's when you don't tell the truth, like police officers say that, when you talk to them or, county sheriffs, I've talked to a number of them and they're so used to everybody lying to them. And one of the things that, law enforcement officers have told me is they look at people and say, well, once they crumble and admit they're lying, the officer, like, why didn't you just tell me the truth to start?
Yeah.
Why did you have to start with that? Why do you have to start with a lie? But I hear what you're saying. Is she, it's another 100 years before, like Plagueis and Palpatine, it's all going to happen. But maybe her behaviors are holding it together for a while. Maybe it needed to be cleaned out at that point, and it doesn't leave ground for someone like a Plagueis and Palpatine to gain footing in a Senate and stuff. I don't know.
Well, I mean, look at what she's dealing with, though, at this point, because you have that Senator Ryan Court who wants to do the investigation of the council or of the Jedi Order. And he's talking to, he meets with Vernestra in this episode, and he tells her that point blank that I think, and this is quote straight from the episode, I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power posing as a religion.
Mm-hmm.
So he's wanting to bring the order down. He's wanting to destroy from that statement, you could tell he wants to destroy the order. So for this to have happened, if she flat out told the truth, look, this is what happened on Brendock. These two kids ended up coming back together and they killed everybody. And now they're on the run with my former Padawan, who I thought was dead, who apparently is now with the dark side. And so that's what's going on. You could have kissed the order goodbye 100 years before the Phantom Menace.
Right.
Then we may not have been dealing with Emperor Palpatine. We would have been probably dealing with Emperor Plagueis.
Starting back then, yeah. Well, it's do we delay the inevitable? If you're doing the wrong things and you start to rot from the inside. No, I get it. The way you're speaking, it really gets me thinking about, I guess what I was thinking when you were saying that is I was thinking back to, again, World War II. And let's say you and I have homes in Poland or Germany or some of these countries, and Nazi soldiers come to the door, and we have prisoners of war that have escaped concentration camps or something like that, or we're hiding Jewish citizens. Is it the right thing to lie to Nazi soldiers? Well, I think in this instance, you and I would make an argument, yes, it is the right thing to lie. But how many times is there those kind of examples, right? When is it a good thing to lie? When is it a bad thing? Like if someone is coming to kill your loved ones and they're like, well, are your loved ones in there? And you and I yell, or we lie. No, they're not in here. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, I think that's justified, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would even go as further and bring it into a more modern day stance where, we all sit here and we live our lives and we see stuff on the news, but we can't even fathom what that is actually like. But at the same point, there are men and women who put on a uniform day in and day out, who stand in the gap between us and them to keep us from having to deal with that.
No.
And I think that is where Vernestra is at, because she knows what the Jedi deal with on a daily basis. This guy doesn't know. He brings the order down. It's chaos in the Republic.
Yeah.
So sometimes, so these people standing up, sometimes they have to, especially when you're dealing with spies, special ops, they're doing things you don't want to know about.
Oh, gosh. Well, you know what you just got me to think about is A Few Good Men. And in
Yes.
the classic scene, right?
Yes.
And I've thought about this a lot, Aaron, and you got me thinking about it again. But
You can't handle the truth.
Well, and everyone thinks that Jack Nicholson's this bad guy, and Tom Cruise is like, I want the truth. You know what? Do you really? Because I do know that most of us Americans, when you lay your head down on the bed, and I hope that there's not bad guys coming, that military men and women have done a whole bunch of stuff that I don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
They have.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
And it's rough, but I'm thankful they do it, and I'm thankful that I can lay my head on my pillow and I can sleep next to my wife, and I hope that my children are safe in their bed. So I hear you. This is, you're making a good argument here for Vernestra. I hear you.
I sit here and I bring that up because I sit here and I think of people in my family, like my late grandfather, who was in the European theater in World War II, my father-in-law, who was special ops during Nam, who have stories to tell, but refuse to tell them because they know it's not something the public could handle.
No.
Now, some of my father-in-law stuff classified, he obviously can't talk about because he was special ops. But like my father-in-law, my grandfather, during as many times as I've brought it up, he never would talk about the war.
Yeah.
Refused to talk about it. I found out more about what he did in the war after he passed away.
Yeah. Well, I've talked on this show before. I worked with Vietnam vets. A lot are gone now. And a lot of them look at me and say, David, to share it with my wife, to share it with my kids, to share it with friends who didn't fight in Nam, the stuff I saw, the things I did. Is that going to help a civvy, right? A civilian? No. It's not going to help them, honestly. What are they going to do with it, Dave? I said, no, I agree with you. I hear you, and that's why, they would prefer to talk to each other. My grandfather, my mom's dad fought in the Pacific theater, like you mentioned, the European theater, and he came back with malaria, changed his life. There's been some massive sacrifices, and I saw the results of what that did to his marriage to my grandmother. The ripple effects of war, just horrific, so. Yeah, I know. Trying to do the right things at the right time and for the, at the right times. Yeah.
And in this situation, Vernestra has got a bowl of disaster. And if this bowl of disaster gets served, the order's done.
Yeah.
So she has to, and I think that's why I think ultimately that could be why she goes to Yoda at the end, because at some point it's going to move past her. Or the other side of the coin. Maybe he knew what happened to her Padawan. So now she's having to get advice from a master, just like Saul went to Vernestra when he found out about May and Osha. It's why she's going to Yoda, because she's found out that her Padawan that they thought was dead is alive.
Yeah. I did put in our show notes, one of my concerns about Yoda here is, does this change our view if he knows about all this and covers it up? Right? Versus, we see him in episode 1, episode 2, by the end, he's like, the what is it? The cloud of the cloud of the dark side has fallen or whatever. The Clone Wars is down. The Clone Wars began, and then you see him battling Palpatine in episode 3. I just, for him to be part of the cover up, a lot. I've said it before. A lot of people are already struggling with, the Jedi not being heroic in this series. That's one thing for me. But when you start bringing in Yoda, and how much I loved him in 1980, as a kid, and if it changes the view of him, I that's a tough one for me, buddy.
Yeah. Well, I'm about to rock your world because he's already covered stuff up.
Well,
look at the end of episode 1. Qui-Gon is dead. They haven't. They're not talking about it. They're not talking. The only two people talking are Yoda and Mace.
Mace.
Always two there are, a master and apprentice. Which one was it?
Okay, well, all right.
Then all through episode 2, they don't discuss a Sith Lord being out there. It's not discussed. They just know the hand of the dark side's at work. Never does he bring up that there should be a master or an apprentice to Darth Maul.
Right.
It says settled.
That's true. Yeah.
So this is not this. If he is in on some kind of cover up, this is not out of. Honestly, this is not would not be out of character for him because we've already seen it.
Okay. Listen, in my head canon, now there's no prequels or the High Republic. Okay. I'm going with the original trilogy, and my heroes are heroes. I'm telling you. I'm going to need a therapist after this, Aaron.
Well, I know a good one. He's on the other side of the mic.
I'm going to do self-therapy here. I love my Yoda. I know you're right, Aaron. See, this is why we're a good team here, buddy. We're covering it. Oh, man, I know. Good point. Good point about episode 1, 2. Yeah, 1 and 2. Boy, you gave me another layer on episode 1 and 2. Yeah, by the end of 2, they're really dealing with this clone army stuff. Yeah, yeah.
And they're dealing with Dooku, who is a fallen Jedi.
Right. And they're thinking, I guess, maybe, well, he tells Obi-Wan the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he doesn't believe it.
Yeah. Oh man, the Jedi make a number of critical mistakes here, don't they? All the way through 1, 2, and then episode 3. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I mean, I hate to rock your world, but Yoda's all into these conspiracies.
I think I was in denial.
Oh yeah.
The 40 defense mechanism of denial. You basically were a therapist and brought the facts, and I don't really want to hear the facts.
Normally for normal people, we would say he's neck deep, but he only comes up to people's knees. So what would that make it, 10 feet under? I mean,
for him. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
But the whole Yoda situation, it is left to be seen what happens, which hopefully will become next season. So let's wrap up this episode real quick. That way, we hit on these last couple points. Then we'll take a break, and then you can go into your psychology of Qimir, because this is going to be awesome, and I want to give you plenty of time for that. So this will, but we need to wrap up everything, because once it's done, we see Osha bleed the kyber crystal in Soul's lightsaber. And before our very eyes, it turns from blue to red.
Yeah.
And you see it just trickling up the blade as it goes. Probably, for me, one of the most mind-blowing scenes in the whole episode.
Yeah, I think the episode guide said this is the first time we see it in live action, right? I remember,
Yes.
I think maybe the first time I read about it was in the Ahsoka novel.
Yeah, that's the first time I remember reading about it.
Too, yep. I think they show it in the, Jedi Fallen Order video games, if I read that correctly in the episode guide, something like that. But I think the first time live action.
Yeah, it is the first time live action. It has been seen in Jedi and Jedi Survivor, but also in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic.
Yes.
Then, of course, in the Ahsoka novel, which is honestly, I want to say that's the first place I remember reading it. And I don't know if that came out before or after the Rise of Kylo Ren comic.
Right.
I don't remember. I'd have to research that, but
yeah.
That's where I first read it. But she reverse bled it. She bled the red out and made them white.
Right.
So, but that was an incredible show of power by Osha, uncontrolled power too, because she didn't even realize she was doing it and was almost in shock as she watched the blade turn color. And she even, matter of fact, after it completes, she kind of even pulls it back and looks at it before pointing it at Qimir again. And it is just very intense scene. And at that point, we have they make their escape, and everybody rendezvous at the tree, and Osha agrees. In a shocking turn of events, she agrees to train with Qimir.
Yep.
If he lets May go. And they agree. And to make sure that May can't lead them to them, he wipes their memories back to when she was, 8 years old and the fire happened.
Yep.
So wipes her memory. And Osha and Qimir make their escape. Of course, May gets captured, and that's why we've been referring to Vernestra talking to May toward the end of each episode, because they do have a sit-down conversation there, and it almost sounds like Vernestra feels sorry for losing all her memory.
Yeah.
But then begins to manipulate at the same point, because she's manipulating what Saul is to her, and continuing that narrative that this is all Saul's fault, which, in a matter of perspective, it kind of is. Actually, it's more Torben's fault, but we'll get that hash. That's a hash for another later.
Sure.
But that really brought us a very unique ending to the episode, where we finally see Qimir and Osha there on the quote unquote unknown planet, watching the sunset on the beach, looking out over the rocks, and she's standing there. She still has that lightsaber in her hand. She is not letting go of it. And Qimir walks up, stands next to her, just kind of looking at her, and then takes her hand. And then the camera comes behind them and kind of shows their silhouettes in the background of the sunset and everything. And very and beautiful imagery, beautiful scene. And I don't know if you saw the post, but Rebecca Benjamin, who has been on our show before, has her own podcast, Tarkin's Top Shelf, and so forth. She posted about how Leslie Headland always said she was a huge fan of episode 2. And she lined up the shots at the end with Anakin and Padme getting married. And of course, these scenes from The Acolyte, and they just line up perfectly. them holding hands, them from behind watching, staring out into infinity. It's literally the same, almost shot for shot the same, and it's beautiful. It really is beautiful. It's a beautiful nod to episode 2, but it was just stunning. And I got to get your thoughts. What are your thoughts on how this episode ended with them Osha joining Qimir and running away?
Well, the thing I was thinking about as you were describing this, we know that Anakin and Padme should not be marrying, right? Based on what the Jedi Order says, and they shouldn't be together. And quite honestly, in my head, these two individuals, Qimir and Osha, shouldn't be together. If things would have gone differently, I always feel like if people would do the right things, who knows what happened between Vernestra and Qimir, but if that goes better, he's not even in this position. I see Plagueis, like when you're describing that scene, holding hands over the lightsaber, looking out over the water, I can just see Plagueis in the background overlooking them, going, "This is great. This is exactly what I want." And I just think about bad people who have taken advantage of people who are in vulnerable positions, and it's happened throughout the history of time. And so those are, just some of the thoughts. Anakin feels like he's not being treated properly by the Jedi Order, and here's two other people who felt like they weren't treated properly by the Jedi, right? Osha and Qimir. And so I love that you brought up this parallel, and quite honestly, this is the stuff that's heartbreaking, right? That when some of the institutions that we look to do the wrong things, and they all do, because humans are involved, then you see people leave and get into things they shouldn't be into.
Yeah.
And so, oh my gosh, we can do a whole psychology corner on that. But I'll stop there and just say, those are just some of my thoughts. I'm really glad you brought up the parallel to episode 2, and you've got 3 of the 4 who have not been treated, or at least their perception is properly by the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very confusing time.
Yes.
For sure.
It's moving that way over the next 100 years. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where evil thrives, in confusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one more question I had to ask before we take this break, and then turn it over to you for your psychology of Qimir discussion. What team is Bazel on?
This has been a very confusing character. I was thinking about this, and I'm glad you put this in the show notes, because this is a complaint I have about the story. There's plenty, but remember back in the episode where he grabs May's leg and he gets Pip to shoot oil out on her face or whatever.
Yeah.
And he just runs and hides in the air ducts or whatever. I'm like, what was that? There was nothing done. He didn't do anything to stop her. In fact, later on, he messes with the controls of the ship when maybe he's just trying to get it so that Sol doesn't shoot her out of the sky. That's the only thing I could surmise when he pulled on that stuff. But nothing's fully clear here to me.
Yeah.
By the end of the episode, they've given him some stuff to smell to track down, right, Osha and May, right, under that tree or whatever, but the Bunta tree. But I'm with you. I don't have a clue, and I'm not really sure, the role. Like even back in, what was it, Day, when we first meet him, and they have him track, right? Yorg gives him some stuff, and Yorg's like, we can't even keep track of the tracker. You're going way out ahead of us. And I heard some different podcasts theorize about different things related to him, stuff that was way out there. But ultimately, I'll end on this. I have no clue what role he ended up ultimately playing in this, honestly. Very confusing, and I don't really like this character, and I don't really know what he added to the story. I don't know. How about you, buddy?
Well, you see, and that's where my confusion comes. I really liked Basil. I was ready to make him the unofficial mascot of the show. But then he goes and he's ripping out the controls and causing Saul to lose control. And I'm like, what are you doing, man? But yeah, he's right there trying to hunt down May again, right there at the end. I'm like, I don't get the logic behind Basil's actions. I mean, I just don't get it.
I don't either. I don't get it. I don't get him on when he was on the ship. Remember after, Saul is heartbroken, he's going back to his ship, and it's really May is with him dressed as Osha. And then we know he's on the ship. And, you and I thought the first thing he would do in the next episode is go over and say, hey, that's not, Osha, that's May. But we don't get that. He does nothing except grab her leg and shoot oil in her face and then go disappear. What
exactly.
Are you working for the Jedi here? They brought you on this mission as a tracker. What are you doing? I have no clue.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. So
weird. That's a head scratcher.
Yeah. So Basil broke my heart. So let's leave it at that. I still got my chop.
That's right.
So, all right. So, all right. We are going to take another break. When we come back, David is going to explore the psychology of Qimir. So you want to hang around for that. Hang on. We're coming right back at you. Welcome back, everybody. Aaron and David here. We are discussing the finale of The Acolyte, entitled The Acolyte. A little redundant. But anywho, you should almost say that's predictable, huh? Anywho, well, we've had a great discussion of the show and of this episode so far, and it's been really good. But David has broken down the psychology of the character Qimir, aka the Stranger. So I want to turn the floor over to you, my dear sir, and allow you to share your psychological breakdown of Qimir.
Well, thank you. As we've discussed this whole season, right? It started in June, and now here we are in July of 2024. Throughout this whole series, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Our listeners have heard that. And the reason why I've thoroughly enjoyed it is because of all these deeper issues that this series brings up. People just heard Aaron and I talking about, is this good or bad what Vernestra did, to throw Saul, all the blame on him, Master Saul, or not. And there's, just deep discussion there about how do we do this in war and the right decisions at the right times or wrong decisions at the right time, all this kind of stuff. So this series clearly has no problem with getting discussion going on deeper thought. And so last episode, episode 7, Choice, I spent, a good deal of time, Aaron, instead of a psychology factoid or a psychology corner, Aaron, I thought very appropriately said it's a psychology episode. And so I hope,
was.
Right.
And it was great.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I hope people really enjoyed that. And I think people could hear the enthusiasm in my voice that it's good to discuss these issues and to talk about deep things. It's okay. And we don't have to get mad or upset about things. And, a few episodes back, when the Stranger appeared, and I don't know if it was then or just a week or two later, Daz Davies, our good friend from Wales over in the UK, was, talking to you and me about doing the psychology of Qimir, and so I that fits perfectly, Daz talking about that with these big issues, like I said, that I covered in episode 7, which is, good and evil, right and wrong, ultimate truth or relativism, moral relativism. And with Qimir, it really brings up this issue of good and evil. So let's jump into this when it comes to Qimir. Let's do a couple things here. Let me start with this question. Is there evil in the world? Right? Is there evil? I was talking to a client earlier today, and she's a retired client of mine, and I was asking her this question. She knows I'm a big Star Wars fan and stuff, and we talked about like good and bad, like when someone is rude to her or me, or to you, Aaron, or to our listeners. Do we call that evil? Well, no, we call it rude or off color, or that was out of bounds, or all the different words that we have for it. Poor form, right? We might say that in British society. It was poor form, But is there evil in the world? One of the things that I asked her today was, is what Hitler did evil? And she looked at me point blank and said, I don't know how you could describe it in any other way, right? And I had addressed this, in our last episode when I talked about, I always try to encourage people, again, real light subject, visualize yourself walking up to Auschwitz in 1942, 43, or 45, prior to its liberation, I think in August of 1945. But do you look at that and say what's going on is evil, right? Now, it's interesting, and Aaron mentioned this a little bit earlier, but towards the end of the episode, when they're kind of, going back and forth between, Vernestra talking to that Senate Oversight Committee as well as the Chancellor, it goes back to her talking to May. And one of the things she says is, she wants May's help to find, quote, a pupil of mine before he turned evil. He was a pupil of mine before he turned evil. She says evil right there, right? And so, here we see a Jedi describing a former pupil as evil. And one of the things I thought that might be a good way to describe the psychology of Qimir, and not just looking at is he evil, is to look at this from what we would say from a professional psychological perspective or a professional psychiatric perspective via the DSM-5. And Aaron, our listeners who have listened before to our coverage of all 3 Mandalorian seasons and Book of Boba Fett, all that stuff. I've brought up the DSM-5 periodically throughout my psychology corners. And once again, the DSM-5 stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, right? It's put out by the American Psychiatric Association, okay? And so what I did is I looked at the section in there on personality disorders, okay? The one I looked at is there's different clusters of personality disorders. This one is what we call cluster B personality disorders. That does involve borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, but also this one, antisocial personality disorder, right? That's right in there. Now, it's interesting, in the DSM-5 under antisocial personality disorder, it does talk about 2 words, psychopathy and sociopathy, right? Are you a psychopath? Are you a sociopath, right? And now we don't officially use those terms. They use antisocial personality disorder. I would say this, it seems to me like, again, none of this is perfect, but sociopathy, or are you kind of sociopathic, is more in line with antisocial personality disorder. And if you are a psychopath, you're looking more along the lines of a John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, if everybody remembers him in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the things he did. So these are what we call psychopaths. And I honestly wouldn't even use antisocial personality disorder. I'd say psychopaths for those guys. Now, let's go over the diagnostic criteria. And I thought Daz would like this. I want to go through the criteria here and then look back at the episodes, okay, and see if he meets criteria. Like with any disorder in the DSM, when you're working with patients, with clients, you look at different criteria sets and see, do they meet it for depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder, et cetera. But we're going to apply this, Aaron, to Qimir. All right, so the stranger. Let's do this. So the first diagnostic criteria here is a description, and it is this. Antisocial personality disorder, the pervasive pattern is this. It is a disregard for and violation of the rights of others, occurring since age 15 years, as indicated by 3 or more of the following. And I'm going to read the next ones, and let me just give a hint to our listeners. He meets at least 3, okay? He meets more than that, criteria-wise. One of the things I want to back up is the age thing, the 15 years of age thing. What's not clear to us is how old Qimir is. He does tell, was it Osha in his on the planet there where it's got the vein of cortosis, it was a long time ago. Right. So it's not clear if how old he is. Now we know Vernestra Rwoh is very old. This is all 100 years before Phantom Menace. I don't know if he looks young like Vernestra still does, in essence. She looks older than she does in the books and comics, but again, still, and so on and so forth. So again, I don't know what his age is, but we're not going to let that bother us. But it's that what the DSM is saying is that we don't diagnose this personality disorder unless we see conduct disorder at a younger age, below 18. So I've worked with kids who are diagnosed with conduct disorder, and these are problem kids. These are the kids that are kicked out of school. They come into contact with the police, could be stealing cars, physically aggressive on people. Again, we don't want our sons and daughters to be like this or to hang out with kids like this. So now, it is a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others, indicated by 3 or more of the following. So again, what I want our listeners to do is, as I read each criteria, think about the episodes that we saw Qimir in, even before he's revealed as the stranger, back when he's in the apothecary. Everybody think about these episodes. All right, number 1, failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors, as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. Now, does he meet criteria for that? Ding, 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 ding. Absolutely. Doesn't he say to May after she killed, who did she? Oh, Indara. I got rid of the shop owner or whatever. What did you do? I mean, it's like this is someone else's place of business. That is unlawful. Imagine any of our listeners at your place of business, a guy like Qimir comes in, kills you or does whatever and takes over your business. You okay with that? I don't think you are. Okay, just going out on a limb, I'm going to just kind of guess you're not okay with that. You busted your butt, try to build a business. This guy comes in and takes it. Yeah, I think I'll just run it myself now. Okay. Number 2, deceitfulness, as indicated by any of these: repeated lying, use of aliases, or conning others for personal profit or pleasure. Ding, 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 ding. Deceitfulness. Like I was thinking about the aliases. I'm Qimir. Oh, well, I'm actually the stranger. And when there's asked, what are you? And Soul asks, I don't really have a name. I use these aliases. He didn't say that, but he does. And it's kind of like, you might call me a Sith, but he goes by a bunch of different names, right? If a police officer asks him for his ID, he's going to have a fake one. When I hand mine, it says David Motters. Okay, I'm not lying to law enforcement officers. So deceitfulness, right? How about what's the whole thing? He says it in that episode 9. I want a pupil for his personal benefit, right? Yeah. That's what it's for, or his personal pleasure. I'm going to get kicks out of training someone to kill other people, right? So 2 for 2, right, Aaron?
Yeah.
All right. Number 3, impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. Now, what's interesting here is, we know, like when we think about Palpatine and Plagueis, and obviously the planning involved and waiting the long game. I do wonder if, again, we see some of that impulsivity perhaps at a young age, maybe leading to the problems that he had with Vernestra or the Jedi Order. Did he fail to plan ahead? Was he impulsive? Did he just, start going off the rails? We don't know. That's not told to us. We might get it in a season 2 or 3 showing that, but I think there's a safe bet that he'd meet criteria for that. 4, irritability and aggressiveness, as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. I would ask our listeners, does Qimir meet criteria for aggressiveness?
Just a little.
Just a little. What were people saying after episode 5, Night, the Jedi shish kebab?
Yep.
You're impaling Jedi, killing them. You break the neck of Yord. You put 3 holes through Jeki. You are staggeringly aggressive. You are violently aggressive. You are a killer. So he meets this criteria in spades. So we're basically at 4 of 4, right? And you got to meet 3. 5, reckless disregard for the safety of self or others. What did I just get done saying? I don't know that he was thinking about the safety of Jeki, Yord, Kalnaka, right? Slices him, and then, he just, or the shop owner, he's obviously killed tons of people. Reckless disregard for the safety of others. 6, consistent irresponsibility, as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. Again, I wonder, when he's training under Vernestra Rwoh, is he irresponsible? Does he have repeated instances where he does not sustain consistent behaviors, respect for other Padawans, other Jedi, Jedi Knights, Jedi Masters, and for others? I'm guessing we would probably see that in him. Number 7, lack of remorse, as indicated by being indifferent to or rationalizing having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. Now let's take this to a higher level. Aaron, you and I, think about the line that he says to Soul, just to dig the knife even deeper into Soul, is after he kills Jeki, Soul says what? She was just a child. And what does he say? With no remorse, you brought her. So it's your fault. Not that I killed her. Not that I put 3 holes. It's rationalizing having hurt. Not just hurt, but killed her. And Yord too. Yeah, broke his neck. But you brought him here too. So there's 7 of 7. Mm-hmm. So when you look at any social personality disorder and the psychology of Qimir, from kind of bringing Qimir into the human world out of the galaxy far, far away, he unequivocally meets the criteria for any social personality disorder. And I would go a step further to say he's like a Ted Bundy. He's like a John Wayne Gacy. He's like any of these big serial killers, Jeffrey Dahmer. Evil through and through. He even says it, right, to Saul in that episode 5. He says, I've embraced my darkness. What about you? Right? So he's not even arguing this point. He's evil. And now we know, like we talked earlier in this episode, he is under an evil Sith Lord, Darth Plagueis. Because that's one of the questions I asked down below here after I put the criteria. Is Darth Sidious Palpatine evil? Is Darth Plagueis evil? Are Sith evil? How does Obi-Wan describe Darth Vader? Twisted and evil, right? So if we ask, is Darth Sidious, is Darth Plagueis, is Darth Vader, is Qimir evil? I'll let our listeners, Aaron, answer that. I know what my answer is. And so, kind of peeling in that big, massive issue of good versus evil, as well as kind of, a way that we look at these issues from a psychological and psychiatric perspective, particularly from this particular diagnosis. He meets this diagnosis in spades. So again, I hope that's helpful. I hope that helps to describe. We could talk a lot more, forgive me, I'm repeating myself here, about evil, and we see it described, the Sith as evil and these Darths as evil. I'll bring back my argument of moral relativity. and even Leslie Headland said this, people don't just wake up, the villain doesn't think I'm the villain, right? You know, but do I think there's evil in the world? Sure. Would I call what Hitler did evil? Would I say that what Palpatine did to create clones to end up being in battles and be destroyed and blown up and killed and the Clone Wars about evil? Of course. You're starting war. You're causing chaos. And so, yeah, I do think that in the Star Wars universe, these particular characters are evil. Some do bad things, but then there's evil. So there we go. We could keep going on and on, but I thought that would be a good place to stop right there. All right.
Very good, my friend. Very good. Whew. That was, I tell you, dude, you're cooking, my friend.
I appreciate
you cooking. And so we will go ahead and wrap up this conversation about the finale with just one more question, David. Do we get a season 2?
Well, I've heard some podcasts say the numbers aren't there for season 2. And I don't know, because nobody has access to the Disney Plus numbers, right? Except Disney, I think. Wrong? I just don't know. I'm hopeful that there is. It's set up. There's so many ways this can go to follow what happens with May, what happens with Osha in her training, and really that triad of Plagueis, Qimir, and Osha. That is incredibly fascinating, and what that looks like and how that would play out, and maybe some other conflicts they would have with Jedi, Vernestra Rwoh, and others. There's a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of different storylines I could see them doing. I hope they do it. I want to see the conversation between Vernestra and Yoda. I'm hopeful, but I'm not holding my breath. How about you?
I would be surprised if we didn't.
Okay. All right.
So, and I would probably riot if we don't. You don't leave me hanging like this.
Oh, man. Oh, it wouldn't be right. I know.
No,
you can't do that to
right.
us, man. Right?
Wouldn't be right. Wouldn't be right. So, all right. Well, we are going to do one final break. Then when we come back, we will do our final reactions. David will have his factoid for the evening. And of course, we'll close it out with the world famous Star Wars dad joke of the week. So hang with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Aaron and David here. We are wrapping up our discussion of the season finale of The Acolyte. So let's get going. So, David, I know you just did a whole lot of talking, but I also know you got your factoid coming up too. So I'm going to let you do your closing or your final reactions first. That way you can prepare for your psychology factoid. So the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, buddy. Yeah, no, in terms of final reactions, I would say this, and it's consistent with what I was saying earlier, which is this series has been a lot of fun for me because from a psychological perspective, it is just so rich, so deep, and brings up really the biggest issues and the biggest questions that we all have as humans. And it's, allowed me a platform to talk about that. And in particular, in our last episode, covering episode 7, and then in this episode, covering episode 8. It's been a joy to talk about this, to discuss. Listeners know that I've read, I think, almost everything, except for a few things of the High Republic. Almost everything, right? And I've enjoyed it. I jumped in, head first. I've enjoyed it. I've had a blast with it. And so this was a lot of fun to see something that is towards the tail end of the High Republic. So I was looking forward to this. I was curious to see what they would do with it. I really loved what Leslie Headland has done in terms of creating a series that brings about very deep difficult issues, and I haven't even talked about in-group, out-group stuff that she's talked about in some interviews, and acceptance, and she's even talked about sexual orientation and stuff like that. There's way more I could talk about based on this series, but I've tried to kind of cover some stuff that I hope that will be helpful and interesting to our listeners. And so, like I said, I've had great joy in covering every episode of this. I was looking forward to each episode, and it's just been a blast covering it. And I hope there's a season 2.
Well said, my friend. Well said. I do hope and pray for a season 2. Like I said, I will be surprised if it does not happen. But for me, I loved this season. I know it was hit and miss for a lot of people, and I definitely respect that and understand that. But for me, this was just absolutely incredible. I loved it. It has probably been, for me, the most captivating of all the live action series that they've made, and that says something because Ahsoka had Chopper in it. Mm-hmm. So for me to say this is the most captivating, the best one that says something. I have thoroughly enjoyed the Acolyte a lot more than I ever dreamed I would. It was absolutely fantastic. Congrats to the cast and crew. All of your hard work paid off. I loved it. Leslie Headland created, in my opinion, a masterpiece. And I honestly can't sit here and thank her enough for all of her hard work on this series. It has been something I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of. It definitely is done. Their hard work definitely paid off. At least for me, it paid off. Because I loved every minute of it, and and now that the Acolyte season is over, I'm gonna be lost, dude. It's not hockey season, it's not football season. Copa America and the Euros just ended, and now the Acolyte's done. You know how much free time I'm going to have on my hands now? Lucasfilm better get on it.
Well, you and I said we're going to get through Temptation of the Force, Acolyte novel that's out right now by Tessa Gratton, and looking forward to getting. I'm a few hours in, but I got to get through it, and then there's one novel left by one Charles Soule. About a year from now, it'll come out. That last, adult novel in the High Republic. Yep.
Yeah, I got to do some catching up. I haven't even started that one yet, so I need to get on the ball. I'm running a little behind on my High Republic reading, but
yeah,
definitely worth it. So, well, that wraps it up, y'all. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you thought about the Acolyte, whether it's just the finale or whether it's the whole series. We want to hear from you and hear your thoughts and your opinions on everything we just watched. And you can do that anywhere you want. Of course, any of our social medias, we are at on Facebook and on X at SW Reactions Pod. We're on Instagram and Threads and TikTok and Blue Sky and Tumblr, where you can find a lot of our show notes. And and I'm missing one. I thought, Pinterest. There we go. All at SW Reactions. So look us up there, and leave us a note. Or, of course, you can email us, swreactions@gmail.com, or leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/Star Wars Reactions. And you can do that anytime, anywhere, just like our friend Daniel Contreras did. And I just got the email all about the Acolyte. So are you ready to hear what Daniel had to say?
Oh, absolutely. I love Daniel.
Yep. So here we go. He goes, "Hey, Aaron and David, lots of thoughts about the finale and this season of the Acolyte in general. I'll list them out just to make them easier to share. He's thought number one, I really liked getting to know the whole group of new characters and a whole new setting. Star Wars is set in a galaxy of billions of planets across tens of thousands of years. I'm glad Lucasfilm took a chance to expand things outside the narrow time and space we're accustomed to seeing. And no Tatooine. Hooray! You're right. Good point. We didn't see Tatooine in this series, did we?
No.
All right. And he goes, every Disney Plus Star Wars show starts with the helmet montage, as I call it. Various helmets, droids, and blue and red appear before the word Star Wars pops up on the screen. Every series has always added a character or two from their show, except the Acolyte. We got Mando's helmet on the Mandalorian, Bucket from Resistance, Perch Trooper from Obi-Wan Kenobi, Fennec Shan's helmet from Book of Boba Fett, B2 EMO from Andor, etc. But if you were to choose a non-face character to include in the Acolyte intro, who would it be? Because they didn't. Who would it be, David? Do you have one? I think it would be hard to put one in.
Well, I know. Do you put the Stranger's helmet in there?
I don't know. I just don't think it would fit.
Oh, true. Yeah.
I don't. So that would be a hard one. I can understand why they did, because it'd be hard to squeeze that one in. All right. Continues on. He says, one of my criticisms when the Attack of the Clones came out was that the Jedi battle in the Geonosis arena. No matter the fighting, they looked like they were always shooting takes on a stage. Not so with these Jedi. We saw them getting bloody, sweaty, dirty, and out of breath. It adds so much more to the realism to see them fight in this way. Having said that, I do feel like some of the sets lack the cinematic look. The nighttime scenes on Kalnaka's planet were the biggest example of this. They really did look like TV sets. Compared to the forest scene, compare that to the forest scene to the Rey, Finn, Kylo battle in the Forest of Starkiller base, also a nighttime scene. You can really see how one feels like it was on a stage and the other gives the impression it was taking place on a snow-covered forest. I felt that the relationship between the return of life on Brendok, the witches, and their ability to create the two children wasn't explained to a satisfactory level for me. At least for me anyway. I don't need it to be fully laid out for the audience. In fact, leaving some mystery adds a good sense of the force at work. But I could have used a bit more information to help bring some of these threads together. What happened to Mother Coral? I don't remember seeing an end to her story. Right. That's a good one. I think this is the first time we've seen screen wipes in a Disney Plus series used regularly.
I'd have to go back.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and confirm, but I think he's right on that. I don't remember seeing him. I think maybe Book of Boba Fett, but I'd have to go back and rewatch. I like the complexity we are getting from the Jedi. In the best tradition of George Lucas, this series is willing to question some of the assumptions we have regarding how they see themselves in the wider picture. I like that there are those in the galaxy who don't see them as the all-good organization that they project themselves to be. Other Force users and members of the galactic government openly view them with suspicion, and we see that the Jedi sometimes give them reason to feel that way, both individuals and as an institution. That's well said. Good point. Very good point. All right. He continues on with Qimir and Soul were the standout characters of the show. I also liked how Amandla Steinberg was able to portray two different characters so easily. Elements of what the Force Witches did lay the path toward Anakin, but they also lay hints toward the dyad of Rey and Ben. I like the fights, not just the choreography, but for the fact that the characters often looked like they were trying to really hurt one another. Too often, choreographed fight scenes look like well-practiced and predictable performances, rather than two people trying to attack and defend with a purpose. I still don't understand the black cloud we saw and why Saul chose to kill Anastasia. Good point. That really was never explained. Explained. Excuse me. The stranger tasked me with killing the 4 Jedi, and when approaching a Jedi, May always tried to get them to attack first. I still don't know why that was the case. Did she need to feel under attack in order to justify her kill? The loss of Jackie and Yord were shocking, but that was the exact feeling the creators of the show wanted us to have. So bravo. I wasn't really warming up to Vernestra's character, nor did I see any real purpose of having her in the Acolyte until the final episode. She really did a good job in that last episode, and I came to appreciate why she was brought in. Should there be a season 2 of the Acolyte? I love these characters and the story that unfolded across 8 episodes. While I don't want a show to continue just for the sake of continuing, I can definitely see story threads that could lead to a new adventure. Maybe, like 3 Phases of the High Republic, we can get multiple seasons of the Acolyte set across larger spans of time.
Nice.
I'm sure there's much more I could think of sharing, but that's all I have for now. Daniel.
That was excellent.
Well said, Daniel. Thank you for writing in. I definitely appreciate that. Any thoughts, David?
Well, the big standout to me is I agree with him that Saul and Qimir were the 2 standout characters of the series. The actors and the characters that they played, just both, honestly, just tragic, right? What happens to Saul, and then ultimately the path that Qimir's on. And but yes, I agree with him. Another point he made was about that Vergence, and I think Leslie Headland said that she'd spoken to Pablo and maybe Dave Filoni about making sure that the Vergence and its association with the twins is different than what we see with Anakin, but they did purposely leave it a little, not everything fleshed out, just like Daniel said, so that they have opportunities for other storytelling around it. So I think, again, if there is a season 2, I think where they could play around with that a little bit more and flesh it out.
I definitely agree there. So definitely agree. So, well, thank you again, Daniel, for writing in. So definitely, if you're listening and you want to share your thoughts, do that at any time. You may, just like Daniel's email, you could hear your thoughts shared and discussed on the show. We would love to hear from you. Well, David, I'm going to turn it over to you, my friend, for your psychology factoid for this week.
All right. I'm going to keep it short and sweet because I know in episode 7, if people listened to our coverage of episode 7, I had a psychology episode, almost basically another psychology episode in this one, not fully, but then a psychology factoid here. But let's do it quickly. It is part 4. I said I was going to do 4 parts on the use of psychedelics, right, in the treatment of treatment-resistant conditions like treatment-resistant depression and treatment-resistant anxiety disorders. So last time I spoke a bit about how psychedelics appear to be working and helping in the brain. Here I just wanted to quickly list a couple of contraindications for usage of psychedelics. A lot of medications and interventions have contraindications where you don't want to use certain surgery techniques or medications and so on and so forth with people, depending on the person, their body, allergies, so on. But one of the contraindications for the usage of psychedelics is for people who have a family history of psychotic disorders or bipolar disorders. One of the things I've mentioned before is that the last thing that professionals want is for people to have a bad trip. And if you suffer with a psychotic disorder and this causes a worse trip, excuse me, that's no good. We don't want anything, any part of that making a problem worse in a patient. Of course, bipolar disorders, part of that is having mania. And that can be a concern when you start opening up some of these brain functions with psychedelics. We don't want to shoot people into manic episodes. There is another contraindication is for people with a history of cardiovascular conditions, because these psychedelics have been shown to increase heart rate and blood pressure. Just like I've said in other episodes, we were very careful at the offices where I work with stimulant medications like Adderall, Concerta, Metadate, Focalin. We don't want to give those to a lot of our retired clients with cardiac conditions because we don't want heart attacks. So you have to be very careful. Lastly, I wanted to touch base on the role of therapy in psychedelic treatments. First, psychedelics are known to stir the pot emotionally and cognitively, so a team is very important, and that does include a therapist, a psychologist or somebody along those lines, who can work along with a physician who's administering the psychedelic, that medication, and that therapist can process difficult emotions and thoughts after the administration of the particular psychedelic. Also, when you look at the literature, it says that it's critical for us therapists to allow patients to find their own meaning in the psychedelic experience. And when I read that, and I've been reading a lot on this, it does remind me of Freud's work, Dr. Carl Jung, on dream interpretation. And one of the things that you do there, and I've done this work with people, is the client's interpretation is the most important. It's more important than the clinician. So you always let the patient give their interpretation first. And it sounds like with people trying to develop this psychedelic interventions, it's the same thing there. Let the client lead the way. Let them say what their experience is and what they got out of it. So I thought that was really good to see. Look, there's way more to follow in this really big, huge, burgeoning area of treatment. And I'll make sure, I'll return to this subject as more information becomes available. And we do more psychology corners or psychology factoids or even psychology episodes. So there you go. 4 out of 4 on the usage of psychedelics in treatment-resistant conditions.
Very good. Very good. And David, of course, if somebody wants to talk to you about the factoid, how would they go about doing that?
Absolutely. Twitter X, that is at David_Modders, Modders. Instagram, just my name. I'm on Blue Sky, and let's see. And then again, I guess what I've been doing lately is just saying, hey, any of the socials for Star Wars Reactions, Aaron's checking them. Obviously, he just got a message from Daniel. And so, Aaron's all over those. And so you could send something there, and he'll forward it to me, and we can talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will. And of course, if you want to talk to me, of course, besides any of the show socials, you can hit me up on my personal X at TA Harris 121079. Oh, well, David, we have reached that time, my friend.
This has been a big episode. If people are still listening, thank you. This is a big one for us.
Yeah, it's very, very, definitely went a lot longer than we anticipated, but there is so much to talk about, and we barely scratched the surface. So, right. But we would be dismissed if we did not end the show the same way we always do, with this week's Star Wars Dad Joke of the Week. So, David, are you ready?
You always ask me. Most of the time I'm not, and I say I am, but I'm ready.
All right. Well, here we go. Why are smugglers so sensitive?
Aaron, why are smugglers so sensitive?
Because they take everything personally.
Oh, wait. Because oh my, that is bad. Oh my gosh. Oh. I'm just sitting there processing. I'm like, oh.
It took a second, but then the groan started.
Um,
My job here is done.
Yes, I fell into the pit. I fell into the pit. Yes. Okay.
Well, David, this has been a blast, my friend.
It is. Yes. Big episode. I hope everybody enjoys it. Loved covering this with you. And I hope everyone enjoyed our coverage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely. Hope y'all enjoyed the Acolyte as much as we did. We appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for joining us. We love y'all. We're praying for y'all, wishing y'all the best. We appreciate each and every one of you. You'll never know how much we do. We can never show y'all enough how much we appreciate y'all. Y'all are incredible, sticking with us week after week. Remember, this is a year to do kind things to people. I know in this insane, crazy world, just a little bit of kindness will go a long way. It'll change the world. So let that kindness start with you. Remember, this is your place for elegant discussion for a more civilized age.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or by Lucasfilm Limited. It's intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars. All names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and the respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Star Wars Reactions unless otherwise indicated. Star Wars Reactions. Elegant discussion for a more civilized age.